of health and restoration. I have my personal story, which she does not know because we met for the first time, on how I found out about Dr. O'Neill. I was on YouTube searching how to heal hormonal imbalance. And I went on YouTube and I saw this lady that looked intriguing. Did not know her faith, that we share the same faith. But she talked about how to balance your hormones. And she was a missing piece of what I was missing and the information I had already gathered. I applied the information with faith and prayer, and it works. With the information you're about to hear today, if applied with faith and prayer, you will see the blessing. So, just like you sitting here this evening, there will be information you have already heard today. It will piece together what you have been learning. You will come to know things that you already know, and your mind will be blown away from information you never heard. I can testify to you today, it works. When you learn from what you hear today, like I mentioned before, and you apply it with faith and prayer, you will find that it works. Barbara, may God continue to bless you and thank you. But ladies and gentlemen, I got more. Before I bring Barbara up, there's more good news. We have several tables set up in the back, as you already seen before, with holistic information for mind, body, and soul. The good news is that the information provided for you today is for you of no cost. We have literature and magazines on health, diet, addiction, forgiveness, faith, and exercise, and more. Complimentary of the Summerville Seventh-day Adventist Church. We do have Living Springs Retreat, which was a YouTube channel that I discovered Barbara in. It's called Living Springs Retreat channel. Visit their table to learn how you can heal naturally. And also, we have the Vineyard. They got some yummy for your tummy. They have a few samples that you can taste just to whet your appetite. And as I mentioned before, through the double door, you'll find the bathrooms there as well. And there's giveaways and prizes, so be surprised. Now, I did say I had a lot to share with you today. Now that we got that all out the way, let us pray before we bring Barbara up. Oh, most Heavenly Father, we thank you for the information that we're about to receive today. Thank you for the knowledge that you have blessed and equipped Barbara with, that we can learn how to better take charge of our health. Help us to get this information and give us the strength to apply, for without you we can do nothing. This is our prayer. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Now for the moment you've waited for, the one and only Dr. Barbara O'Neill.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is good to be here, and I'm going to be covering two subjects this evening. I'm going to be looking at diabetes, and I'm going to be looking at heart health, heart disease, strokes. The reason I have chosen these two subjects is I think there's not much difference between Australia and America regarding these. But in Australia, there's 500 new diabetics diagnosed every day. And in Australia, heart disease is the #1 killer. And so I think it's a very pertinent thing, seeing I only have you for 2 hours to cover these subjects. And you will find, as I go through these, there's a lot of covering over too in them. So I'm going to begin with diabetes. In Hippocrates' writings, Hippocrates is 400 years BC, there was no mention of diabetes in his writings, because the fact is there was no diabetes on planet Earth until sugar was well established. But there's a few other things that are coming in to compound the problem. There's an old proverb, it's Proverbs 14 verse 6, that states, "Knowledge is easy to him that understands." So my aim is to give you an understanding of how the body uses glucose. And when you have an understanding of that, you automatically have the knowledge on how to conquer this thing called diabetes. So you might say, well, what am I talking about? Am I talking about type 1 diabetes or am I talking about type 2 diabetes? My answer is yes. Yes, I am. I'm talking about them both because it's all about controlling blood glucose levels. But what I want to start with is that little molecule glucose. What is glucose? Where does it come from? And how does the body use it? So we're going to begin by looking at the fact that never in the history of mankind have human beings consumed so many carbohydrates. So let's have a look at carbohydrates. So what's a carbohydrate? Now, carbohydrates used to be called starches, but carbohydrate, starch is the same thing. Now, what would most Americans have had for breakfast today? Cereal. We know it's a popular food because there's a whole aisle devoted to it in the supermarket, is that right? And you have a look at some of the ads on the television. What are they pushing? And do you have a cereal called Nutrigrain? Who's on the front? Iron Man? And so what's the message? If you eat this, you're going to look like that. Nothing could be further from the truth. And you will see why. I have a book in my library at home. It's called Cereal Killer. And cereal is written C-E-R-E-A-L. You'll find out why in a minute. Bread, is that right? A lot are eating bread. Also cakes. You call them cookies, pastries. See, we call cookies biscuits. So when we see your signs on the side of the road where it says biscuits and gravy, we think, what? Because for us, a cookie is a biscuit. So we'll say cakes, etc. And something that we don't really eat a lot of, but I know you do because I always get them on the plane or I get offered them, pretzels, yeah? A lot of pretzels. And pasta and pizza and rice and potatoes. You call them French fries, is that right? We call them chips. You've probably heard that. And last and certainly least in nutritive value, the pure crystallized acid extracted from the sugarcane plant. Would you agree with me? Americans are high carbohydrate consumers. All of these foods break down in the gastrointestinal tract to glucose. And glucose, as the singular structure, is what absorbed into the blood. And when it gets into the blood, it goes on the M1 main highway, portal vein, straight to the liver. Your liver is your project manager, and your liver determines where that glucose goes. And the first place it'll go is to the CBD, Central Business District of the human body, is the inside working of the cell. So the glucose goes in. How does it get into the cell? It gets into the cell under the action of insulin. Aha. So let's draw our pancreas. Here's our pancreas, and your pancreas lives under your left lip, and it releases insulin. And insulin unlocks the door to get the glucose inside the cell, whether it be eye cell, ear cell, muscle cell, liver cell, brain cell. It goes in under the action of insulin. The glucose goes in. It goes through a 20-step pathway. This 20-step pathway gives us 2 units of energy. The end result of the 20-step pathway is a chemical form of glucose called pyruvate. And pyruvate, as the chemical form of glucose, gets fed into the next stage, which is an 8-step pathway. This pyruvate gets fed into the 8-step pathway that gives us a whopping 36 units of energy. Now please stay with me because I'm talking about you. I'm talking about your cell. And it's all going to make sense in a minute. So what makes the difference? How come a 20-step pathway only gives us 2 units of energy and an 8-step pathway gives us a whopping 36? What makes the difference is oxygen. This is called the aerobic pathway because it uses oxygen, whereas this pathway is called anaerobic because by the process of fermentation it produces energy. On a high carbohydrate diet, the first place the glucose goes is to the cell. But on a high carbohydrate diet, we've still got a lot of glucose left over. And so now it gets stored like a little bunch of grapes inside the cell. Now this is particularly interesting for the diabetic, actually for anyone. And it looks like a little bunch of grapes, but they're little molecules of glucose already in your muscle cell, just waiting to be used. Quick release glucose stores. They're called glycogen. The best place or the best time to do your morning walk, is in the morning. Before breakfast. Don't do it after breakfast because all your body's energies are going to want to go to digesting your meal. So how are you going to have the energy to do your morning walk? Your glycogen stores already sitting inside your muscle cell. And when you start moving and you need energy, the body just plucks a molecule of glucose, runs it through the pathways, plucks another molecule of glucose, runs it through the pathways. But on a high carbohydrate diet, we've still got glucose left over. And so now the body stores it in the most amazing fuel depot in the body. It's called fat cells. And on this high carbohydrate diet, what's happening? Getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I was in the Cook Islands 3 weeks ago. Ooh, they're big. A little 2-seater couch takes 1. They're big. Is it because of the coconut? No, it's because they've stopped the coconut. They've pushed it aside because there's some information coming out saying it's not good. Have you heard it? Do you know anyone can say anything? What we're interested in is what is. So the third place that the liver will send the rest of the glucose is to be stored as fat. Now what I have given you here is basic anatomy and physiology. Just the basic facts. And as you can see by what I've shown you, fat doesn't make you fat. What makes you fat? It's the high carbohydrate diet. And unfortunately today, many people are eating breakfast like a pauper, lunch like a pauper, and the king and the queen together. Whereas we should be eating breakfast like a king, lunch like a queen, and tea like a pauper. And I'm at Living Springs Health Retreat at the moment, and one of the guests said, Sister Barbara, what does a pauper eat? I said, sometimes nothing. Sometimes nothing. And if you eat breakfast like a king and lunch like a queen, you don't usually leave much at night. And the beauty of that is when you go to sleep at night, the body doesn't have to store anything. That's the basic science. Now the role that this plays in diabetes is this. When someone's on the high carbohydrate diet, constantly releasing more and more glucose to the body, so much glucose is being released that insulin keeps going to the cell to put more in, and the cell gets to the point where it says, I'm sick of the sight of you. And so the cell develops insulin resistance. You've heard that? It's just sick of the sight of him. Insulin resistance. And so what happens now is the blood glucose remain high in the blood because it can't get into the cell. And it's going up and up, and so the brain says to the pancreas, more insulin, more insulin, more insulin. And the pancreas says, we've already given so much. And because it can't get into the cell, it can't go anywhere, it spills out into the urine. And diabetes mellitus means sweet urine. But what else is happening is the pancreas is just getting worn out, and it says, I'm done. I've had enough. I'm not going to work anymore. I'm not doing this anymore. And so with the sweet urine and having to drink lots and lots of water, it's one call of the body, then it's found that the blood glucose levels are dangerously high. Newton's third law of motion states that to every action there is an equal and an opposite reaction. We should always be asking, why are these things so? To say that you just got diabetes defies basic science. There is always a reason. Always a reason. In his book, Serial Killer, Alan Watson states that 1 in 3 American children by the age of 3 are obese or overweight. And 80% of American children are eating cereal for breakfast. Now, can you see why they're overweight? Because what's it all being stored as? Fat. Alan Watson goes one step further. He looks at why aren't steps made to hold on to the cereal and the grain industries to stop brainwashing American children and American adults to give their children cereal. And he goes behind the scenes and he finds that the grain and cereal industries go to court to defend their right to brainwash American children to eat cereal. How much wheat does America grow? A lot? Huge amounts. So what do they want you to eat? Wheat. Wheat. That brings me to another area of diabetes. So people have been eating sugar for a long time. Diabetes has been around ever since people started eating all this sugar. But something has caused diabetes to explode. And it might surprise you to know what it is. It's the hybridized wheat. In the 1950s, wheat went through intensive crossbreeding. You see, when I was a little girl and I went out west, wheat grew that high. It doesn't grow that high anymore. It only grows this high. See, in the 50s in Mexico, Dr. Norman Bulag and his team of scientists put the wheat through intensive crossbreeding, and they came up with a heavy yield, but the stalk kept breaking when it was that high. So they went back to the drawing board and they came up. They eventually produced a plant that only grows about 2 foot high, has a very thick stem so it can hold the heavy yield of grain. So 1969, he got his Nobel Prize. Notice the time frame, 1969. 1970, that wheat went worldwide. It went out like wildfire because the farmer gets 6 times more grain per acre. What does that mean? 6 times more money per acre. He's got to pay the bills. And because it only grows so high, in some countries they can get 2 crops per year. So by the 1990s, every cereal, every bread, every cake, cookie, pastry, donut, every pretzel, every pasta, every pizza. What's it made out of? The hybridized wheat. Now, what was never addressed was the effect of that hybridized wheat on the human body. And the hybridization of the wheat created a starch called amylopectin A. And amylopectin A gets the blood sugar level up very high, very fast. So that's like up very high, down very high. That's amylopectin A. That's the starch that was created in the intensive crossbreeding. Let me give you something to compare it to. Amylopectin B is found in bananas and potatoes. And if you're familiar with the glycemic index of food, bananas and potatoes get the blood sugar level up pretty high, pretty fast. So what's that like? That'd be like not as high, not as fast, not as low, not as quick. Amylopectin C is found in chickpeas, lima beans, black-eyed beans, cannelloni beans, soy. So beans. Isn't it right down south? You like greens and beans, is that right? So when the lady that I had lunch with today, she said, "What do you like?" I said, "Greens and beans. That'll do me fine." Those beans, they're fantastic for diabetics because they give a lovely, slow but sure rise. And that's what every single cell in our body wants. It wants a steady, consistent delivery of fuel. Can you see the sugars and the hybridized wheat get it up very high, very fast? And then very quickly, the brain says to the pancreas, "Quick, release insulin, we've got an overload." And high insulin is a result of high glucose. So high glucose demands high insulin. So then it's going low. But because so much insulin was released, now it's going too low. What's that called? Hypoglycemia. So now the brain says, "Oh no, we're too low. Stop the insulin, release the glucagon." Glucagon is the other hormone that's released by the pancreas, and that's released when the blood glucose levels go too low. But by the way, what does the person do when the blood glucose levels go too low? Give me you call it a candy, cup of coffee with 3 teaspoons of sugar. Lolly, yeah, we call them lollies. Well, will that get it up? Oh yes. Boom! Now we're too high. Oh no! Stop the glucagon, release the insulin. Boom! Oh no, we're too... Can you see what's happening? This is whiplash. And what's happening, especially when say a young girl is doing this, then she gives birth to a baby. She can give birth to a baby with weakened pancreatic gene because of her sugar habits. They don't tell you that on the sugar packet, do they? But what's coming in to the equation is also the wheat. Are you familiar with the glycemic index of foods? The glycemic index of foods is a reading or an index on how quickly the glucose in that food is released into the blood. So glycemic index baseline is 55. Anything below 55 is considered low GI, low glycemic index. Anything above 55 is considered high. For instance, cherries. In fact, most of your berries sit at about 26. That's why they're a good fruit for a diabetic. Low GI, or slow, low delivery of glucose. Grapefruit. Grapefruit sits at about 25. Sugar, it sits at 59. Now that's not a surprise, is it? What is a surprise is that refined wheat, so that would be white bread, white cereal, white cakes, that sits at 69. You know what that means? A slice of white bread will get the blood glucose level up quicker and higher than a lolly or a candy. Whew! I'm glad you're sitting down because the next piece of information is shocking. Wholemeal. Wholemeal. Wholemeal bread, wholemeal wheat, wholemeal pasta, 72. Now how could that be? Because it's not refined, it has more amylopectin A in it. Because it's not refined. Now let me just clarify this, because my husband said, Michael, a lady rang up and said, Barbara said white bread's better than brown bread. Obviously, wholemeal bread has more fibre. Wholemeal bread has more B vitamins. I'm referring to the blood glucose levels that are affected by the starch amylopectin A. I gave this presentation one day and a lady began to cry. I said, why are you crying? She said, I'm a diabetic. I was diagnosed 3 years ago. She said, I'm 68 now. I do everything they tell me. I have wholemeal bread, wholemeal pasta, wholemeal cereal. She said, and every 6 months I go to the doctor and he puts me on more insulin. And what's the definition of insanity? To do what you've always done and expect different results. She said, don't do what the lady down the road does. She eats chocolates and cakes and pastries. She said, I don't do that. She said, I'm crying because I've been so frustrated. I do everything they tell me and I'm getting worse. She said, I'm crying tears of joy because you have just solved the puzzle. So why aren't diabetics told to stop wheat? How much of America grows wheat? It's exactly the same in Australia. We grow mountains of wheat. So what we have to look at here is vested interest. If you want to pursue this a little bit more, and I hope you do, because we all should be private investigators, is that right? There's a book called Wheat Belly by Dr. William Davis. And in Dr. William Davis's book, Wheat Belly, he pursues what they've done to the wheat. And the reason why his book is called Wheat Belly, because he shows that it gets the blood sugar level up so high. Oh, thank you very much. He said it gets the blood sugar level up so high, so fast, huge amount of insulin has to be released, and that insulin gets the glucose out of the blood by putting it into glycogen or fat. And the type of fat is a glycerol fat that particularly stores on the belly. Have you seen how tiny the waist is on Julie Andrews? Where are the slender waists today? Is it the wheat and the sugar? How many products are both together? Isn't that all your biscuits and your cakes and your cookies and your donuts? It's them both together. A man rang me up one day. He said, Barbara, I had a blood glucose crash on the bus, hypoglycemic crash. I said, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I said, what'd you have for lunch? Oh, I didn't. What'd you have for brunch? He said, that tells me straight away he doesn't really want to tell me. Can of Coke and 2 donuts. Whew. What caused his blood sugar crash? The donuts and the can of Coke had got it up so high, so fast, huge amount of insulins have to get it low. No wonder he has to have a lot of insulin. So can you see that before sugar was refined and established, there was no diabetes, but since wheat, and what have we got here? Went worldwide 1970s, is it since the 1990s diabetes has exploded? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to write a list of the things that you can do to conquer your diabetes, whether it be type 1 or whether it be type 2. Same conditions apply. So number 1, there are things you've got to stop. Stop refined sugar. Now, if someone's got diabetes, they can't even handle maple syrup or honey. Eventually they'll be able to. But initially, all sugars must stop, especially the refined. All wheat must stop. Oh, that's if you want to conquer diabetes. So what can you eat? There are grains that are wild hybrids of the original wheat that have not gone through the intensive crossbreeding. Spelt. Have you heard of spelt? One lady said, how do you spell spelt? So spelt and kamut. The original wheat is called encorn, and you can still get encorn. You have to search a little bit more for that, whereas the spelt is more freely available. And you have Trader Joe's, shops like that? Yeah. I went with a gentleman one day. He said, please come with me. I don't know what to buy. And we came to the bread department, and I said, just feel the bread. Oh, that one's a little bit heavy. This one feels a bit lighter. That one, squish right until your fingers touch. That's too light. Because you might like a heavy bread. But this gentleman didn't have a good set of teeth, so I had to get him a lighter bread. Then we read the labels. No, we won't have that one. Look at this. Spelt, 100% spelt. Sourdough. What the sourdough process does is break down the gluten in the grain, so it's easy to digest. If your ancestry goes into Germany or Russia, I can assure you that your ancestors all ate the sourdough bread. Some people get caught up on the name sour. Well, it's not sour. It's referring to the culturing process. So what else must stop is caffeine. Oh yes, I think I heard a few groans. What's caffeine got to do with it? Well, caffeine stimulates an insulin response. Because you see, when caffeine goes into the body, it's just like your body's had a crisis. And in a crisis, you get the fight and flight response. And when you get a fight and flight response, insulin has to be released to give you more glucose to feed your fight and your flight. Having a cup of coffee is like meeting a tiger on the path. How would you feel if you met 3 tigers on the path a day? How are you after 6 months? Now, if you're feeling very sad right now because you love coffee, let me tell you why you love coffee. Because it gives a little lift, is that right? Gets the brain going. No wonder you've just seen a tiger on the path. You see, it's a crisis. And so, to conquer this, it's important to come off the coffee. So I'm about to tell you how you can get off it without pain and suffering. You see, people say to me, do you drink coffee, Barbara? I say, no, I just watch the people suffer. Day 1 at our health retreats. Oh, even the laundry ladies plan to watch for this. Oh. The reason why you get such a headache is because you're addicted to it. And if you get a headache and have a cup of coffee, what happens to your headache? Would you call that an addiction? So how you can stop without pain and suffering is, let's say you have 3 cups of coffee a day. Well, tomorrow you put half a teaspoon of coffee and half a teaspoon of something like Roma, you know, those cereal alternatives. And you'll hardly notice the difference, and your addictive nervous system is getting that little bit that it's addicted to. And every day, a little more Roma and a little less coffee. And if you have 3 cups of coffee a day, often within 2 weeks you can be totally off without any pain or suffering. So that's how you can come off it. But it's very important to conquer diabetes that be stopped. Number 2. It's also important that you exercise. Why is exercise so important for diabetes? When you exercise, your cells are demanding a bit more fuel because you're running up a hill. Can't run up hills? Rebounder, little mini trampoline. Everyone can do that. So when you start to move, your cells require more fuel. And so insulin receptor sites develop. You've heard of insulin resistance. Well, you can turn it around within a week. How do you turn it around within a week? Stop these and start exercising, or an exercise bike. The most powerful form of exercise to get this reversal is your high intensity interval training. And as the name implies, these are intervals of high intensity and recovery. Now, all the research shows that about 30 seconds high intensity is good. If you think 30 seconds isn't very long, try it. As I'm running up the hill this morning, I got to 20 seconds, my body says that'll do. I get to 25 seconds, my body says this is getting a bit ridiculous. I get to 30 seconds. We should get to that every day. That gets enormous amounts of oxygen in. And remember what oxygen is doing. If you've got oxygen in that cell, you've got 36 times more energy. Forget the coffee for energy. It'll give an initial burst, but then it'll get a corresponding dump. Whereas you get your energy by a morning little clip of exercise, your energy levels will remain all day. That's the good news. So 30 seconds high intensity, about 90 seconds recovery. If you need more, that's all right. Rome wasn't built in a day, and your fitness is indicated by your recovery time. Al Sears, in his book's Pace, he quotes a lady who did 7 seconds high intensity and needed 15 minutes to recover. Whew. I tell you that because not many people are quite that unfit. And if you are, it's all right, because his book Pace means progressive acceleration cardiopulmonary exertion. Progressive. This is progressive. What you can't do tomorrow morning, you'll probably be able to do a bit better in a week. Just keep at it. Just keep at it. 30 seconds high intensity, 19 seconds recovery for a cycle of 6. That's 12 minutes a day. Isn't that good news? 12 minutes a day. We've all got 12 minutes. It's the best insurance policy that you can make. Exercise will cause a development of extra receptor sites on the cell for more insulin, more glucose. You can turn insulin resistance around very quickly. Number 3, water. We need at least 8 glasses of water a day if you're my size. Yes, if you're a little bit more than me, you need a little bit more. Why? Because your cell needs water to release the glucose. It needs water. Every single body function requires water. From the neck down, we're 75% water. From the neck up, we're 85% water. Brain cells can't function properly without water. Well, what about juice? I think we've all already covered tea and coffee. Well, how clean would your body be if you washed it in juice? It's got to be water and water alone. One lady said, I can't drink water. It makes me feel sick if I drink it in the morning. I said, how much do you drink? She said, well, I drink 16 ounces all at once. I said, yeah, I'd feel sick too. This is how you do it. You wake up in the morning, you have half a glass of water. Go to the bathroom, have another half a glass of water. Get dressed, have another half a glass of water. This is my habit. I pray, have another half a glass of water. I read my Bible and I have another half a glass of water. I usually rise at 5, walk at 6 and eat at 7. That is my usual habit. So I'm able to get sometimes 3 glasses in before breakfast. It's important to stop drinking half an hour before the meal and resume drinking about an hour and a half after the meal. If you drink with your meals, you'll water down your hydrochloric acid. And then your body can't break down your protein properly, and your cells are going to suffer from lack of nutrients. And yet it's such an American habit, isn't it? It's such an Australian habit too. If we go to a restaurant, what would you like to drink? Oh, no, thank you. You'll have water then. We let them bring water, otherwise they won't leave us alone. I was in the Qantas Club before I travelled here, and I was having breakfast there, because I'm a platinum frequent flyer, and I'm so glad because you can get good meals. And this young waiter kept saying, water? No thanks. Juice? No thanks. Tea, coffee? And he went away and he came back a few minutes later, are you sure you want nothing to drink? I said, I've already drank a lot. He said, okay. Because most people are busy. They don't drink, then they sit down to eat, and drink. Isn't that true? I just always have my water by me. But something else is required to get the water into the cell, and it's salt. Now we're going to look at salt in more detail when we look at high blood pressure, because if you've got high blood pressure, what are you told? You've got to stop that salt. Well, there is one type of salt that you should stop, and that is the refined. No, the salt I'm talking about is the whole salt, so that can be Celtic. Celtic salt contains 82 minerals, whereas Himalayan salt, it's about 75 minerals. And it's the minerals that get the water inside the cell. So I have a little crystal of Celtic salt, I put it in my mouth, I give it a little chew and drink my water before I begin every glass. So that's 8 times a day. The water is able to be drawn inside the cell when you're having that little bit of salt. I want to give you the story of a man that came to our retreat named Bobby. He was type 1 diabetic, he was 62. When he arrived, he was in a wheelchair. You see, recently the doctors had cut his lymph nodes out in his groin to try and find out why he had diabetes. I don't understand that one. And so on the flight, his legs had swelled, so he was in a wheelchair. He said to me, because this was in America, he said, I have spent $1 million on my health in the last 10 years. He said, I'm on medication for high blood pressure, for cholesterol, for blood thinning. He said, I'm on 90 units of insulin a day for my diabetes. Whew. When he arrived, he had just spent $800 on bandages for his legs. I said, I hate to break the news for you, but you won't need those here. He said, really? I said, yeah. I said, with swollen legs like that, I want you to rebound 1 minute every hour. Because what the rebounder does, it stimulates your lymphatic system. Now, most people know about their blood system, and we're going to talk about that in our next lecture, but most people don't know anything about their lymphatic system. Your lymphatic system is your body's vacuum cleaner. What does your vacuum cleaner do? Sucks up waste. That's what the lymphatic system does. And those swollen legs, that's lymphatic fluid. So all he had to do was this. That's all he could do at first. So what we gave him was we gave him a very low carbohydrate diet. Very low carbohydrate diet. And if you're familiar with Dr. Robert Atkins, an American doctor, very famous doctor, he's considered old hat now. He's back from the 80s. What's the modern Atkins? Is that called paleo? Yes. That's right. Do you know, it's interesting with Atkins, it is estimated he's helped something like 15 million people. And he only did his diet for weight loss, but he found that his diabetics were coming off their medication as well. Because what does this high carbohydrate store as? Fat. Gives a lot of glucose, overloads the pancreas and the cell. So we gave Bobby a very low carbohydrate diet. So what did he eat? Number 3, no, we're done 3, 4, he ate a lot of vegetables. And he ate, this is number 5, he He ate low glycemic, low GI foods. So if he did have fruit, that would be just things like berries. He also ate high amounts of protein. Now I'm a vegetarian. Where do we get our protein? Do you remember the amylopectin C? What foods gave amylopectin C? Beans, beans, beans. I have a book called Self-Heal by Design. You can get it off Amazon. And I have recipes in that book, and all the recipes are for beans. Because I find most people don't know what to do with them. He also was having nuts. You can overdo the nuts, maybe 8 to 10 a meal. If you're as little as me, 8. If you're a bit bigger, you can go 10. Seeds. Pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds. There's your protein. That's your vegetarian protein. Vegetarian protein is a lot lower in carbohydrates than grains are. And he was having healthy fats. What were the fats? The fats were nuts, and the seeds, also coconut. That is a nut, but coconut oil. But didn't the FDA say recently that it's not as safe as we previously thought? Did you see that on social media? Well, have they gone over to the South Pacific Islanders and said, quick, stop eating the coconut? When Captain Cook landed on those islands, he was confronted with the most magnificent specimens of humanity he had ever seen. The men were strong, agile, perfect teeth. The women were very beautiful. He had a bit of trouble with his men. They were so beautiful. What did they eat every meal? Every meal, coconut. And the white man said, stop the coconut, it'll give you heart disease, diabetes, and they all said, what's that? So they stopped because white man did free them from some weird spiritual practices. They certainly brought in reforms. But they could have taught the white man how to eat. So they stopped the coconut, and white man introduced 5 lethal whites: white rice, white wheat, white refined sugar, white refined salt, and white cow's milk. And those 5 lethal whites are doing their job. Their diabetes has come up equal to ours. Their heart disease has come up equal to ours. I like to use 3 things: science, history, and common sense. It's not very common today. The coconut is an excellent fat. And Dr. Bruce Fife, he has written about 6 books on this. And he will give you the facts. He will give you the science, and he shows that it's actually quite a remarkable oil. 2 of his books, one's called Stop Autism Now, the other book's called Stop Alzheimer's Now. And in those books, he shows how it can be used to heal neurological problems. Quite interesting. The other oil, and this is the oil that God talks about in the Bible, olive oil. Now, I don't suggest you drink a cup of olive oil a day. We've got a bit of common sense here, is that right? Just a little bit, but you need those oils. But there is an oil that will interfere with blood glucose levels, and that's margarine. And in my next lecture on the heart, I will show you that it hasn't stopped heart disease at all. It's still the #1 killer, and yet we were told if we stopped eating butter and started eating margarine, it would reduce heart disease. Has it? So let me go back to Bobby. So Bobby, we didn't serve any of this. He started exercising, little at first on the rebounder. He started drinking more water. He ate a meal that was high in vegetables, a few fruits, high, generous amounts of these, and his blood glucose levels stabled right out. In fact, every day he had to lessen the insulin he was taking. He was with us for 2 weeks. By the end of 2 weeks, he was taking 10 units of insulin a day. And what was he on when he came to us? 90. 2 weeks. He emailed me. 3 months later, he said, I am off all my medication. Now, before he came to us, his doctors had actually sent him away and said, we can do no more for you. He's just spent $1 million there. Wow, he could come to the health retreat twice a year for 20 years on that. He said, I'm off all my medication and the doctors are astonished. Type 1 diabetic. He said, I'm swimming 30 laps a day. I bicycle 6 miles a day and I rebound 3 times a day. He said, and I have lost, I have to get this right, I have to get it in pounds. I think he'd lost about 50 pounds at that stage. He said, when I went home, he was 62. My wife, who was 40, she said, this is your baby, I am not interested. I like my coffee, I like my wine. You just keep with your baby and I'll keep with mine. Well, after 3 months, she began to look at her husband. He looked better than he'd looked since before they were married. She's interested. And last email I got from him, he said, she's starting to do the diet. She's starting to do the lifestyle. And she's so excited because she's lost 20 pounds. I believe it is our responsibility to prove to our doctor that we can do it. And I have had people who've come to us, learnt these things, and their doctor is the one that's taken them off their meds. But I believe everyone should be their own doctor because only you know how you feel, only you know what you've been through. And everyone that comes to me wanting help with diabetes, they test their blood glucose levels every day and you adjust your medication accordingly. As the lifestyle kicks in, the blood glucose levels will change. And then the medication can be little by little reduced. Number 6 is early nights. It's between the hours, you're in daylight saving, yeah? It's between 10 and 3 at the moment. We're just going into finishing daylight saving in Australia. So when the daylight saving finishes, it's between 9 p.m. and 2 a.m. These are the hours that your body heals. These are the hours that your body does its house cleaning. These are your brain particularly, these are the hours where your brain does its sorting. These are the hours where healing accelerates. But you've got an assignment to do. Well, wake up at 4 and do it. But don't allow your eyes to be on those screens, especially those short screens. And don't put your technology anywhere near your pancreas. It'll make it go haywire. I haven't got time in these lectures to discuss technology, but it's something you can't see. So many people do not realise the danger. But I'll just make one comment. When you sleep at night, you should sleep in the dark. There should be, how many people sleep with a Christmas tree around them of technology? So charge your technology in the next room. And the worst place to put your laptop is on your lap. Look after the family jewels. And ladies, no iPhones in the bra. You know, you can buy a bra now with a pocket for the iPhone. I was reading the testimony of a breast surgeon. He said it's really alarming how many young girls are coming in with breast cancer, and he's been linking it to the iPhone in the bra. So put it in your handbag, and guys, it's all right to have a man bag. Is it this simple? It is this simple. And I have seen many conquer diabetes, type 1 and type 2. I can't tell you it'll be as quick as Bobby's. Bobby was just totally committed. He said to me, anything you say, I will do. He did not step sideways. He's the CEO of some big companies. He was about to retire. He said, I'm back on board full time. He's only 62. People are aging too young. They're calling Alzheimer's diabetes type 3 today. Did you know that? Because it's interfering with the blood glucose levels going to the brain. It's causing a deterioration. Before I close, I want to explain one more phenomenon. Do you ever wonder why diabetics lose the feeling in their feet? I asked a friend of mine who's a doctor, I said, why do diabetics lose feeling in their feet? She said, I don't know. And I'll be covering it a little bit in the next lecture on the heart. Here is the blood. You've got high glucose in your blood. It connects, these are protein molecules. When the glucose is high in the blood, it connects with glucose. So the glucose covers the protein molecule, becomes sticky. And when it gets down to those tiny little capillaries, these little sticky molecules block it. So you can't get any more blood going down there. That's why. Yes, that's why the high sugar causes the extremities to lose their feelings, because it's blocking the blood going down to the extremities. But once all this turns around, once the exercise begins and the diet changes and the offending articles are ceased, you'll be amazed how quickly diabetes can be turned around. One man said, Barbara, what are you selling? I said, that lifestyle. I believe God meant it to be simple, cheap and easy. The hardest part is when the rubber hits the road, is that right? It can take up to 2 months once this is stopped for it to be totally out of the body. So be patient. Bobby got quick results because he was at a health retreat, and that sped things along a little bit. But little by little, as you implement these things, you will find that the body responds. I'm going to give everyone a break now. It is 6 o'clock. So if you could please have a 10-minute break. Sorry, 7. Welcome back. Have I got voice? Welcome back, everyone. The microphone's gone up a bit higher, so we're hoping you'll get better voice. I'll answer a couple of questions. What about glucose intolerance? Glucose intolerance can usually be remedied by basically the diet that I just explained, because it is low glucose. So you're still getting glucose, and as you saw, every single cell in the body needs glucose to run. But what all this does is just dump too much glucose all at once in. Whereas the diet that I was explaining to you is nice, steady, slow, sure delivery of glucose. And I find that that will remedy. What about a gluten-free diet? A gluten-free diet is very similar to the diet that I have been explaining, because when you think about it, how many of these are made out of wheat? And wheat is the highest gluten. But what happened when they hybridized the wheat is it changed the gluten structure from a very simple structure that's easy to digest to an incredibly complex structure. So that's one of the problems. And the other problem is people just overdo the gluten. Overdo the wheat, cereal and toast for breakfast, sandwiches for lunch, pasta for tea, donuts, cookies, mid-morning, afternoon. That's almost 100% wheat. So that is also another problem. Is decaf coffee okay? One of the problems is most decaffeinated coffee has been decaffeinated with chemicals, so you've got another problem in there. Apparently there is a water-extracted Swiss brand of decaf coffee. I guess you could try it for a week and then stop, and if you get any symptoms or withdrawals, maybe you're getting more than you think. Is apples sugar okay? Apple sugar? I'm not sure what apple sugar is. Pistachios okay. Pistachios can tend to mould, so they're not the best nut, as peanuts. And if you like peanut butter, try macadamia butter. Oh, you don't live in Australia, they're too expensive here, aren't they? Try cashew butter, try roasted almond butter, they can be nice. So I'll get into my next presentation, and a couple of the questions that I saw I think will be answered in this presentation.